All right, hello. So the last show we saw at the Colorado Shakespeare Festival last night was the Two Gentlemen of Verona, and we didn't see the whole play because Mr. Anderson somehow thought that since the Saturday night show was at 8 o'clock, the Sunday night show would also be at 8 o'clock, but it was at 7 o'clock, so we missed the first 15 minutes, which was completely my fault. Loved it, really enjoyed it, and in fact, I think enjoyed and was entertained of the three shows we saw the most by this one. And I want to talk about why that is in a minute. The first thing I want to talk about is the connection I saw between this one, Two Gentlemen of Verona, and All's Well That Ends Well. All's Well That Ends Well is considered a problem play morally, ethically, and at the very end, we're not sure why Helen would want to continue to be married or to have this Bertram as her husband. The sort of the main plot of the Two Gentlemen of Verona is that these two best friends, Valentine and Proteus, Valentine goes off to a different Italian city and falls in love with a woman named Sylvia. Proteus stays behind and is in love with Julia, who reciprocates his love, and they exchange rings, and they are going to love each other forever. And the very moment that Proteus sees Valentine's love Sylvia, he throws his love for Julia over. And not just falls in love with Sylvia, but actively undermines and betrays his friend to keep Valentine from running away, eloping with Sylvia. Sylvia she hates Proteus the whole time, and she knows of Proteus's love for Julia. Very confusing. At the very end, when because it's a comedy, everyone lives happily ever after, and Valentine is going to be able to marry Sylvia. Julia and Proteus return to each other, but the play ends with them far apart on the stage, and Proteus takes a half step towards her, she takes a half step towards him, but they're very far apart, and the light dims and goes dark, and that's the end of the play. Has Julia forgiven Proteus? She dresses up as a page, a boy, and when she travels to find him, and she's upset, bereft, as she sees the man she loves, has thrown her love over.
And now it's time for me to chime in. And threatens to rape Sylvia right before Valentine comes in and fights him off. So Julia has not only watched her betrothed throw her over, actively sabotage his friend, but literally was attempting to rape the woman he loves who has scorned him. And then he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I like that the play ended with her being like, instead of just being like, oh, all's forgiven. Rape happens, we know.
Yeah, both plays, All's Well That Ends Well, Two Gentlemen of Verona, give us problematic male leads in Bertram and in Proteus, and both plays do not give us a happy ending for those couples. And I think that's something to be thought of, something to think about.
Well, and it's the director, right? The director's choice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the plays ended however they were, I think they're supposed to be intended as comedies to end happily, but I like that both directors chose to complicate those endings.
Okay, and you wanted to talk about one other thing.
I did. So when we saw the Book of Will, the actors all used British accents. And I think it was because the language is less complicated. It was written in modern times. And so when we think about our cognitive ability, how many things can we do at once? They used these British accents because they could, it added to the reality of this happening in Britain. And with Two Gentlemen of Verona, folks just used their American accents, and they did a really nice job of enunciating, and they knew and understood their lines. Some performances that we have seen have been people are just reading lines aloud and don't really know what they mean. Here, every actor knew what every line meant, and they articulated it in a way that we always understood what, not just what was going on, but what exactly they meant at any time. And that was really well done. And it's an interesting choice of what kind of accent you want your actors to be using when they're performing.
All right.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about, well, two things. One, there was a dog.
Oh my
Lee,
god,
Lee
it was the cutest dog ever. I almost jumped on stage.
Yeah.
It was a good thing we were in the back row because we came in late.
Yeah, we were in the very last row. I put my hand on Leah's leg just to make sure that she didn't run down on stage. There are two fools in Two Gentlemen of Verona, servants. Speed, Valentine's servant, and Launce, Proteus' servant. And Proteus, Launce has a dog, Crab. So there was a dog in the show. What I really liked, what made me like this play the most, were, and it happened a few times, specifically the most it happened, was in a scene that, if you look on the screen, the guy in the back with the sunglasses who's yelling, he's Speed, Valentine's servant, and that's Valentine. Speed is on stage with Launce, the other servant, and the dog. And the dog is supposed to bark, like he's got one line, and he didn't on stage. And Launce looks at him and says, "You had one line." And the audience were laughing, and they started riffing on that. And then a little later, both characters again, and they were clearly off script. They were clearly ad-libbing. They were one-up joking with each other and pointing things out to the crowd and reacting when this part of the audience laughed or pointing at that person. When Lee and I, on our honeymoon, went to the Globe Theater and we saw Merry Wives of Windsor and Midsummer Night's Dream, and you've got everybody sitting in the back, but then you've got all the groundlings, on the floor and resting with their elbows on the stage. I've come to realize that what I've really loved to see is when the actors on stage aren't just aware of the audience, but include the audience in the show. The off script, the ad libbing, the pointing things out, the talking. At the Globe, for Midsummer Night's Dream, every performance, the cast would go out into the audience and pull a random audience member up to play Starveling, one of the rude mechanicals. In Merry Wives of Windsor, the Falstaff character is surprised and spits out his beer on the groundlings and then pours the water of his shoe out on the groundlings. And a third time goes to the edge, and you see the groundlings, everybody, all the people on the stage move away because they're certain he's he's drinking a beer. They're certain he's going to spew that on them again, and he doesn't. He swallows it, and then he winked at us. And it was the same thing last night in the Two Gentlemen of Verona, where the willingness of the actors, of the production, right? Because certainly this is something that they're going to be comfortable doing because the director is comfortable with it, that the actors are comfortable with it. But when the performances has permission not just to speak to us, because obviously characters throughout Shakespeare's plays are speaking to us, the audience, but it's more than just breaking that fourth wall. But when we understand that it's entertainment, right? And that if the crowd laughs at something, you can riff on that, you can play on that, you can say something that wasn't in the text, and that's what made last night's show so enjoyable and fun. Were these moments where we as the audience felt like we were in, not just in on the joke, but in the play with them.
Sure, and just to add to what Mr. Anderson just said, James Baldwin wrote an essay called "How I Learned to Stop Hating Shakespeare." And one of the most poignant lines in the essay is that Shakespeare is the producers are not responsible to Shakespeare. Shakespeare is responsible to the producers. And when the only creative vision a director has is to elevate the bard, we don't need to be responsible. Shakespeare is Shakespeare. He's going to be here forever. The ability to riff, to ad-lib, to break the fourth wall, I think, is what keeps Shakespeare responsible to the producers, right? It's to whatever the current moment is, making him engaging, and that way of extending beyond the script. For us has been one of the most powerful ways of doing that.
All right, well, this wraps up our fantastic weekend in Boulder for the Colorado Shakespeare Festival. We are going to head to Wyoming so Leah can get her dinosaur fossil on, and then we're going to make our way to Billings for both of the Montana Shakespeare in the Park performances. This company goes all over Montana and Idaho and maybe Wyoming and South Dakota as well at times, and they do two shows every other night. So they're doing King Lear and Twelfth Night. So we will see King Lear Tuesday and Twelfth Night Wednesday in Billings, Montana. So thanks for listening. As always, we'll post these on YouTube, on our Facebook page, on Instagram as well. Do we post these on Instagram? Yeah. And so if you have any comments, questions, things you'd like to respond to about what we brought up, questions that you have that you'd like to know more about or that you'd like to challenge us on, any thoughts you have about the shows coming up, King Lear and Twelfth Night in Montana, and then next weekend, which will wrap up this for part of the road trip, King Lear and Much Ado About Nothing at the Illinois Shakespeare Festival. So any comments, questions, queries, concerns, we'd love to hear them, and we'll talk. Be well. Thanks.